when we talk about the ability to become a change agent in the world, one of the things that was attractive to me in Freemasonry, sort of from the outside in, was this idea of a good man becoming a better one
Yeah.
and having a safe place to do that. I didn't know what that meant, but I've definitely wanted more of it. Like,
Brian Maddox, thank you so much for coming here tonight and sharing some of your evening with us.
thank
Really
you so much
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
You're welcome. So, I was pleased to receive this really cool book in the mail, A Mason's Work. And you are a member of the Freemasons. So,
Indeed.
and I want to dive into the book, and but we're going to talk about it in a way that's a little different than maybe some others may approach it. But it's going to pull some of the depth out that you and I have shared privately. If you could offer a little snapshot on what are the Freemasons, why did they start, and what do they stand for and do today? Like, why are they important to society today?
Okay. So the 50,000 feet view on Freemasonry in general, right, was essentially emerged out of the old trade guilds. And the back in the day, it was really sort of important social responsibility to build buildings. And that effort was one that you just kind of didn't want Johnny Rando showing up and building your house or your church or what have you. So the sort of trade knowledge became really important to maintain.
Yeah.
As society advanced and evolved, people started to recognize that those principles that are used in the trades can be used in an introspective capacity, in a more of a enlightenment pursuit of enlightenment kind of modality. And so it became something called speculative masonry, which is the idea that you're using these concepts to help improve yourself. And as more and more people kind of glommed onto that idea that there is a benefit to these kind of teachings that come from your hands into your brain and then back out, hopefully in your behavior, that it makes sense to sort of organize in groups to facilitate that growth and development. So the modern Freemasonry traces its sort of recent origins back to around 1717, although it certainly was in place before that. In my area of the woods, Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, there is a long history of Freemasonry predating things like the Constitution, predating the American Revolution. And a lot of the Enlightenment principles about how Freemasonry is structured actually entered into our form of government, in fact. So, this concept of how do we work together and how can we best sort of interact and engage to grow each other has literally made it into governance.
Mm. So a lot of people, I think, have this idea, especially with YouTube, and all the truthful
Mhm.
videos everyone sees, that the Masons are kind of like this secret society of Illuminatis who are ruling the world and have all this secret knowledge, like the yogis and other esoteric wisdom traditions. Are those things still part of the current Freemasons movement? Or have they kind of morphed into more of a philosophical way of life?
So to answer the sort of first part of that, right, which is there is a whole subset of society that is looking for someone to blame for all of their stuff, whatever that might be, and you're going to find that any organization that maintains some level of secrecy
Yeah.
is going to run afoul of people that don't like that as a concept. The important thing about secrecy in the craft of Freemasonry is it should be treated in the same way you would treat attorney-client privilege or the relationship with a doctor, right? This is if you're going to go to a group of men who want to help you grow and become a better person, and it's not just men at this point, um, then you're going to want to be able to trust that those folks are not going to go blabbing your business out to the world, right?
Right.
That has bred this sort of counter movement of folk who are just like, I don't know what this is, and certainly I need some way to demonize the fact that I'm not getting what I want out of my life or what have you. So it's best to blame the Freemasons. But I will give you the immediate proof in the pudding here. Drive past any Freemasons hall in anywhere in the country, and you're going to find it at some level in like some level of disrepair. So if we can't keep the paint on the buildings from peeling, there's a good good likelihood that we're probably not the secret cabal behind the universal sort of discontent that's in play.
Hmm. Your book is fascinating, and it's not like um, other Freemasonry books that I've seen, and I think I have one or two in my collection, which is like history of society, specific people and over time, how groups split, how they fell apart and dissolved, and things like that. Um, I look at your book more like, and you're going to correct me along the way, but I've got tons of questions now, that
Mhm.
it's really looking to problem solve. When did you first realize that something essential had been lost in modern Freemasonry, and that you write that the symbols have remained, but the operative method has largely disappeared. What do you mean by that?
So a lot of and I don't mean to disparage anyone that's, on the quest, right? Whatever that quest might be. And for some folks, the way they discover the things they need to learn is by searching the historical record. So you'll find that probably 90 to 95% of the content out there on Freemasonry is just like you said. It is this discovery of some sort of historical record, some of which is true, some of which is false. My ambition here with the work and what I've learned in the process was that the the functional work of a Mason, or I'm from a collar county of Philadelphia called Delaware County, and we're very blue collar sort of broadly around here. And what that means is we're good at working with our hands. We're used to working in a physical way. What you find though, with just modest reflection, is that as you learn to work your hands, you're also learning to work your mind. So when you take a simple tool to operate on the world, like a gavel, for example, which is just a hammer to knock off the rough edges of a stone, you can use that same concept to knock off the rough edges of your own behavior.
Mm,
And so the symbolic approach to the craft to re-operationalize that, to essentially take that speculative process, use it as a mathematical kind of approach to becoming a better person, and then re-extroverting that out into your own behavior is the sort of central premise of the book.
yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting because I hadn't seen other tradition. I mean, in martial arts, or in Chinese philosophy, you have things like the sword cutting through the soul or the illusion, using metaphor and such. And I haven't really come across a lot of that in other traditions. So the fact that the Freemasonry tradition is looking at things like, the I forget what you call that. It's the right hand square, the
Yeah, the
90
square.
degree angle, the square. Okay. And the
Yep.
hammer and all these things have become symbolic. Do you think that over time a tradition like the Freemasons has become more performative than transformative for the members?
So
And
there is some of that for sure.
yeah.
In any group that is effectively pulling from the public, right, without a doctrine, what happens, and I'm sure you've seen this in the wisdom traditions that you've studied, is as lay people sort of get their hands on it, they will diminish it in some ways, or they will modify or manipulate it in some ways. Um, One of the difficult things about Freemasonry is, unlike a lineage where you can say that guy knows how this is supposed to be interpreted, Freemasonry doesn't have that sort of doctrinal rigor. So you don't have somebody who's the custodian of Freemasonry as a concept. You have 1,000 different points of interpretation. And then what the challenge is that most of the seekers, the folks that are looking to figure out how to use this stuff, are trying to figure it out from 1,000 yogis. And
Right.
all of them have a slightly different flavor of the truth. Um, the fundamental sort of approach that's inherent in the craft, though, the idea that you take these physical tools use them speculatively and then change your behavior, is something that's kind of always been in there, but not well operationalized. So
Yeah.
for the folks that are just walking in for the first time, it used to be you would go through and you would get your degrees in the craft, which is just a progressive sort of education. And as you got that education, you were then, okay, congratulations, you're a Freemason now. Go read the 1,000 books. And I didn't find that to be the framework that I wanted to push against, right? I was
Right.
looking for a more of an operationalized approach. So that's where the book came from.
Mm. So it's kind of like an apprentice program, back in the day, with plumbers and electricians and carpenters, and you're kind of like you're on the road and you're learning from someone, and then you get some amount of skill and knowledge under your belt, and then it's up to you to keep going with it. Because I'm very familiar with hearing about the different levels, like 32nd Freemason and a Grand Dragon. So I had assumed that there were these, I don't know, the Grand
Yeah, yeah.
Dragon,
No,
that there
I don't
are
think we have
actually
any of those.
levels, but that these levels would be kind of a tradition holder or standard bearer in their meanings.
So it's interesting you say that. Um, so let me sort of disambiguate for just a minute.
Yeah.
Some of the sort of things that come up. There's really only in Blue Lodge Freemasonry, which is the standard Freemasonry, there's only 3 degrees.
Mm.
It's the Enter Apprentice Mason's degree, the Fellowcraft degree, and the Master Mason's degree. And a common interpretation of those things is that they are progressive, that you go from one to the other, and that is like moving up. But that's a misinterpretation of it. It is actually, you are all three at the same time, right?
Mm.
Each one of those are perspectives that you can wear like you would wear a pair of
Yeah.
glasses.
Yeah.
And so you say, I need to put on, in Zen mind, I need to put on my beginner's mind to approach this problem. I need to put on my seeker's mind to approach this problem. I need to put on my master's mind to approach this
Mm.
problem. The same thing's true. And one of the reasons why there's these aprons sort of conceptually is quite literally so you can put on perspectives
Mm.
and look through problems from a different angle. So
Mm.
this notion of sort of linear progression as if it's an altitude or a hierarchy is
Right.
somewhat, misinterpreted, I think,
Right.
by folks that just haven't been made familiar with it.
Yeah.
There outside of the Blue Lodge, so outside of those first 3 degrees, there's 2 sort of major lineages in, beyond Freemasonry. And what happened in this sort of golden age of fraternalism was that guys really liked this way of being educated. The process of getting their degrees is a process, like you would expect to go suffer with a master through martial arts. That is a process that you go through. The degrees and the sort of education of it was very physical and very memorable, right? You experience it as a living thing. When you go up in the degrees and you get your third one, you go, well, now what? Guys really wanted more of that style of education. And so it got to the point where people were inventing degrees all over the place. And we got to first degree, second degree, third degree, fourth, all the way up through the 33rd degree, which is an honorary degree on the Scottish Rite. And there's a similar kind of lineage on the York Rite. And again, those are just sort of names of paths that you can take.
Yeah, martial arts, same way. There was, 4, then 9, then 12, then 15. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It gets out of hand a little bit, How many great,
All
great,
roads
great,
go to the
great
same
grandpa can
place,
you
right?
be? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So transformation is a word that everyone uses, but they rarely define what they mean by it. How do the Masons define the word transformation? Or how would you think that it's defined within Masonry?
So it's interesting to say that, interesting sort of to put that word out there. And I need to be very clear and direct. I only speak from my Masonic experience. One of the perils of Freemasonry, like I said, is that there is no definitive answer of those things. The moment I suggest that I am the definitive answer, I actually become part of a different problem, which I'm trying to avoid. Um, what we don't do is actually have a definitional landscape for post-transformation or transformation itself. The
Mhm.
idea is we are all works in progress. And as a work in progress, you are in a state of constant refinement.
Mm.
So that does not necessarily mean you don't change over time or transform over time, but there isn't a sort of a singular inflection point where like transformation specifically occurs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's more a felt experience within the individual that they feel that they are transforming by virtue
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
participating in the learnings and group
Yeah. Exactly.
interactions of the lodge,
Yep.
and so forth. Yeah. But that's different from just acquiring knowledge, because you can acquire a ton of knowledge and not transform. You know, I can learn how to rewire my house, but I don't transform fundamentally as a human being, you know.
Well, you might.
Yeah,
You
I
might.
might. Yeah.
Well, so and that's really what it comes down to. When a practice is fully living and embodied, right? It doesn't have the boundaries on, oh, this is a lodge thing, or this is a life
Right.
thing, or this is a house wiring thing, right? As you well know, the when you are sort of post transformation, if you will, the answer is still chop wood, carry water. Now,
Yeah.
does a master chop wood and carry water differently than an apprentice? Probably not, but he's fully aware of what he's doing, which is just that means that the capacity for further transformation is always present. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Hmm. In terms of transformation, are there things that you all realize that transform first? Like it's your beliefs that transform before the behaviors and before attention, and that comes before an identity shift or a character strengthening? Or is it kind of like depends which road you're entering on for which goes first type of thing?
I think that there is some sort of regularity to it, if you will, some common milestones, and at a high level, there's some ordering there. Um, if you're studying the work well, you'll study things like um, there is a in the process of becoming a Mason, there is a divestiture process where you're like, listen, I can't go in there with all of my bling on. I can't go in there with all of my worldly titles and say I'm the CEO of this company. That makes me more badass than you. That divestiture process, you go through literally a preparing room to be able to essentially be open, just like the old Zen story about the guy who goes to have a cup of tea with the master, and I can't put any more tea in this. Your cup is already filled, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Same thing's true here, and so you have to go through some of that as a concept to kind of get to the point where you can absorb the rest, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. But
Hmm.
we don't have like sort of gateways or tests like is he in empty cup mode right now? It doesn't We don't have that kind of thing. um, we do essentially monitor each other's behavior for opportunities, and this is where the sort of sangha component of the craft kicks in. It's when you start giving people responsibility or authority or power in some context or another. Hey, can you organize this pancake breakfast? We then will use the Masonic principles to help guide them, the person who's taking on that task for the first time. Hey, listen, you really got aggressive with how you were asserting what you wanted this thing to be, and it made it so that no one else wanted to help you do that.
Mm.
That's not a good application of the compasses or a good application of the level or what have you. And so we essentially sort of correct each other using that symbolic language as a protective abstraction. So I don't have to say, by the way, stop being a jerk. I can say, do you think your behavior is in alignment with this tool?
Right.
Which is a whole lot
Oh,
more
yeah.
Socratic and a whole lot more sort of direct and non-conversation, not non-con confrontational.
Confrontational. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Well, it keeps the defensive ego from jumping in,
yeah,
because you're not
exactly.
saying your behavior, you're this, you're that. Yeah. Do you have to, as a member, as a new member coming in? I mean, you're talking about symbols. Your book talks about symbols, and you talked about a compass and a level
Mhm.
and a hammer. Um, how does one come from just understanding the symbols themselves? I mean, it, to actually living them. And you gave an example there about a mentor or someone else in the group coming to them and saying, "Are you in alignment?" But before that stake happens, because that would take a long time if you had to wait for the pancake breakfast opportunity to screw up to learn. What are
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other ways that the kind of intellectual understanding of the symbols toward the lived meaning of them?
I have to move up in altitude for a second to answer the question better. Okay, when Freemasons, when people become Freemasons in the process, they are vetted for whatever that means, right? It's like, hey, well, look, we're going to have you around to a bunch of our social functions and see if you're the kind of person who can kind of be here with us and do this in this way. If you come in here and you're like passing out your business card so you can sell more houses every 20 minutes, like that's, we don't want you. And you might find that Freemasonry is a good choice for you later on. But if you're coming here for mercenary or some other ulterior motive, we kind of pull that away. What happens as a result is that by the time you go through this initiatic process, you are already at a level of trusting relationship with the people that help you go through that process. It takes 15 men to make one Mason. Like the
Mm,
ritual process is collaborative. It's a deeply collaborative process, and as such, that represents an investment. It's a social investment. It's a temporal investment, right? In some cases, it's a capital investment, and so when you're going to make that investment in someone, you now have this really kind of entry level, high level of trust, where I know that this person is kind of worth investing in. And that means I can say things to them about their behavior that may be holding them back. When we meet, and we meet for fellowship on a regular basis at my lodge, we meet weekly. And when we do, the conversations are very much, some of them are social, like, what's, go birds kind of stuff. But even in those conversations, there is surprising opportunity where somebody's frustrated with something about work or somebody's struggling with something in their personal life. And because we have this high level of trust walking in and this agreement, this mutuality where we're going to keep each other's secrets and not blab to the neighborhood, you can then just start conversations and those conversations turn into sentiments that like over time, we've had a couple meetings at my lodge where guys have stood up and said, listen, Freemasonry has saved my life.
mm,
And you're like, wait, what? Like, this is my social club. What do you mean it saved your
that's right.
life? And the answer is, I came here in a place at a time when I had something that I was really struggling with. And it helped me not do the things that were destructive to me. It helped me step away and get perspective because I knew somebody cared about me enough to say these things.
Yeah.
And so from that ground of care, the regular interactions build that foundation that we're talking about.
Yeah. So this idea of taking symbols into lived practice is like I found to be the central core contribution of your book,
Mm.
which is
Mm.
something I haven't seen a lot of people talking about on YouTube. There's a bazillion Freemasonry videos, and they're all like, "Ooh, super secret. Delete this after you see it."
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so secret. Only 2 million people have viewed it so far.
Yes, exactly.
You know. But why do you think? Why are symbols so powerful? But if you had something to state first, you can state that first, please. I didn't mean to
No, no.
cut you off.
So the symbolic language, because it's accessible,
Yeah.
and in a lot of ways, it's axiomatic, right? You'll find that almost every symbol has embedded in it its own opposite in a lot of ways. It has embedded in it a lot of interpretive analysis. The symbols, I don't know if you remember back in the day, this was, I guess, in the late 80s or early 90s. So we're going back now a bit, but there were these rubber bracelets that came out that had WWJD on them, which
Mm,
stood for What Would Jesus Do? And what people would do is quite literally they would kind of thumb this bracelet or the way you would thumb a rosary when they were struggling with something in their life. Well, the what would Jesus do kind of mind that you would put on to try and solve that problem is interesting, but it's not differentiated.
mm,
Right? What would Jesus do is essentially what would be the best response of the best person I can imagine,
right.
which isn't necessarily the most applicable response for you in the given moment. So the
Mm,
symbols themselves actually create a ton of sort of cognitive breathing room to both isolate what you're thinking about and to operate, right, in a very specific capacity. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We talk about the 24-inch gauge in Freemasonry. The 24-inch gauge is a 2-foot ruler that old Masons, folks that were working with stone, used to use to lay out their work, right? When you put two 1-foot stones next to each other, you want to make sure that you're aligning them up, or when you cut them in half, how do they fit? We use it in a speculative capacity, like you would divide 24 hours in the day. The 24 parts of that 24-inch gauge are divided into 3 equal parts: 8 hours for rest and refreshment, 8 hours for sleep, and 8 hours for the relief of worthy and distressed brethren, right? People that are in your care group, your Sangha or your family or what have you. Now you take that and you say, okay, what does that look like in the real world? Well, for people like us, Mark, it probably looks like a Franklin Covey planner.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. It probably looks like, your phone and scheduling and calendaring on your phone. Well, you have to understand, 300 years ago when Freemasonry came out, none of that existed. They didn't have support groups. They didn't have therapy. They didn't have, Alcoholics Anonymous. They didn't have a real good answer for a lot of this stuff. So Freemasonry said, look, these tools have a lot to teach, quite literally, about everyday life. So let's grab the sort of practical and speculative components out of them and operationalize it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think about you're making the symbol into an instrument
Mm-hmm.
rather than just an idea or a concept, right? So it's like you have the physical instrument, you're turning it into a conceptual or mental instrument to help you problem solve or lead your life, like a
Yeah,
North Star, kind of
100%.
yeah, yeah.
And what's even more interesting in that sort of domain is that the lodge itself, of a Masonic lodge, is organized in different functional roles, like you would
Mm,
imagine a work, in your organization at work. Like you have a manager, you have a finance person, you have a marketing person, you have all sorts of different people that make your companies work. The Masonic Lodge is, again, organized around that operative delivery of Masonic sort of craft, or the traditional stonemason stuff. So there is somebody who evaluates the work at the end of the day. There is somebody who calls the craft off from labor to refreshment and makes sure that the workmen aren't exhausted. Each
mm,
of those functional roles is also a cognitive perspective that you can put on anytime you need it, right? So
mm,
not only do you now have, I am the guy in charge, I now have this library of symbols that I can use to essentially help me figure out, as the person in charge, or as the id, or as, sitting in the seat of full awareness, am I using the tools correctly to help govern and manage my life?
mm. So it's like the symbolic practices reshape perception, or reshaping perception. So as somebody who is new to this, a lot of these concepts, which is why I loved your book so much. In fact, I'm going to hold it up again. It's called A Mason's Work
Thank you.
by Brian Mattocks. Is that I think, when I was studying acupuncture, there's so many points on the body. Everything's in Chinese, and then they have the English too, but you have to learn both the names,
Mm.
right? I had a deck of like flashcards, for a better sake of a better word. You pull it out. Here's the lung channel point one. How many cards is how many points on that channel, the liver channel, the stomach channel. I imagine, how many symbols are we talking about within Freemason that are in the toolkit, and then versus those that are like the core? There's got to be a core dozen or something, or
Yeah.
whatever. And how does one come to get familiar with them enough that they're not going, I'm panicking, which Freemason thing? I don't even know which one to look at right now.
So it's interesting that you ask that question for reasons, lots of reasons. First and foremost, um, every jurisdiction has a different set of tools, which
Okay.
I is kind of strange. There's the core, 12, and then in other jurisdictions you have stuff that we don't have here in Pennsylvania, for example. There's things like, some jurisdictions have a beehive as part of their Masonic toolkit, right?
Mm,
Which is like, where did that come from? Or some people have clay and charcoal and stuff like that.
right.
The sort of core Masonic tools, the plumb, the level, the square, the 24-inch gauge, the common gavel, the trowel, these are all in any Masonic lodge. You'll find them plastered on the walls everywhere. those are the common ones. The sort of next level ones that you're going to see are much more speculative in nature. So, for example, it is encouraged that every Freemason studies the liberal arts, right?
Hmm.
Grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy.
Yeah.
Each one of those represents its own type of knowledge and intelligence that through which you can view the world. Like
Yeah.
geometry, for example, right? Geometry is great because it helps you understand relationships and proportions.
Nice.
That's geometry is as above, so below, right? It's
Right.
built into the study of geometry is understanding how the pieces of the world fit together, or how the pieces of my own moral compass fit together, or how when I treat this person in this way, how does that change these angles over here,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Every one of these sort of symbolic approaches essentially has the chance to be a lever to help you grow and develop as a person. The the vast sort of swath of them, though, you'll find I've got a library of them in the book. I think there's I think there's 60 some almost in the book, if I recall correctly. And if there's not, there's some that I've got that I haven't put in the for the next version of the book.
That's right.
Um, but the idea here is a symbol only serves if you can articulate it and differentiate it from the others, right? So
Right.
if you can't, if you don't have a way to differentiate that symbol and use it sort of directly, then it's not a symbol that serves you, and you shouldn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you start working with any of these things, you'll figure out what symbols are going to speak to you more than others.
Hmm. Yeah, so that gets out. I was actually going to ask another question, but you're kind of answering it there. So if I'm understanding it correctly, I would say that those symbols don't reveal the reality of what's happening, but they can organize your attention and perspective about what is happening. Would that
100%.
be a correct way to state it?
Yeah, 100%. And
Mm,
the other thing that the symbols let you do is it lets you extrovert your thinking in a lot of
mm,
ways. So you can
mm,
pull it out and operate on it, right? So when you operationalize your thinking, you're not just operating through a kind of the felt experience and trying to massage it in that way. You can literally put it out there. What am I struggling with? Oh, I'm struggling with my boss thinks that I don't do a great job at work. Okay. So let's put that on the table. Let's break out the symbols. Let's break out the perspectives. Do I have evidence that this is true? Am I dropping the ball anywhere? Is this all felt sort of consequence? And you can start literally operating on that concept because it's not stuck in your brain.
right.
That symbolic language and the sort of role playing that comes with it lets you pull it out. It
Mm,
also then lets you coincidentally give it to someone else,
yeah.
which means I can now tell you about my problems without giving you the specific names or context. I can say I'm feeling like I have data that's not working for, the work I'm trying to do right now, or I'm getting negative feedback, and use the tools as part of a fundamental part of that conversation, a protective level of abstraction when I'm communicating with other people. And
Mm.
that's where this stuff really starts to take off. You don't have to reveal that you're struggling with thoughts of infidelity. You can say, I'm having a hard time keeping my behavior square right now because I have, because somebody at the office is really going to trying to work me here. Whatever the case may be, that gets you a ton of more help and
Yeah.
more sort of safe help than you're going to get if you are not sort of using those tools as a kind of abstraction and a way to objectify a conversation.
Hmm. It's very interesting. So it's only, yeah, getting those things out of one's head is really important for problem solving, because most people try and solve the problem from inside the problem, and you really can't often. You have to solve it outside the problem. So putting it out on the table and having symbols around it and seeing which ones align, and then having feedback from 1 to 15 people who have experience with these symbolic tools without having to have all the details, because everything is conceptual anyway, and say, okay, you know, here's how different ways to handle and approach it. That's a really cool problem solving
Yeah,
perspective,
and what it, it's
methodology.
it, and what's amazing is it's baked right into the education itself. So you
Mm,
mentioned earlier in your question about like how does one pick what tool to use,
right.
or how do you remember all of these things? And the reality is the education that you get the way the initiatic process works is to give you that information. Now, you may not remember all of it, but because it is an experience-led education, you internalize it significantly differently than if I sat you down in a classroom and started holding up flashcards,
Right.
which doesn't necessarily help. So.
Yeah, I know that from experience. Lots
Yeah.
of experience. So can this idea of symbols become embodied in the follower of this path?
So I think this becomes an important point of distinction because there is not a strong embodied practice in Freemasonry. It is a very cerebral kind of process. That's not
Mhm.
to say there isn't some, right? But it is not like you're going to get in the martial arts at all, right?
Right.
Uh, what is true about a lot of the martial arts and is true about Freemasonry is that when you work on one side of the problem, it tends to untangle the other. So as you sort of shape your consciousness, as you script or get better at understanding your own behavioral scripts for how you're misbehaving or how you are denying yourself access to the light, whatever that case might be, you really, that will show up behaviorally. That will show up in an embodied practice. And I'll give you kind of a more maybe obvious example. So as somebody goes through the initiatic process, right, it's 3 degrees, it's, a handful of hours is usually over the couple of months. Um, the guy that enters that process is kind of, like, oh yeah, this is interesting. I'm curious. The guy that exits that process will give you a hug like a brother you've never met.
Nice.
What's the difference, right? So, of course, the practice is embodied, right? Because people want to express themselves physically as a net result of the mental and emotional transformation that takes place. But is one sort of, is it explicit or deliberate? Not necessarily. Not in the same way you're going to find that in martial arts, you are able to move in this way, and as a result of repeated practice, you can move even more so, or even more fluidly, or what have you. Um, you do get some level of connection, but it's almost coincidental.
Hmm. Yeah. When I think about embodiment and how I define it on the inner life, on my platform, is not just physical movement, right? It's things that change the organization of how you act and feel in your body and how those changes move into your life. So if you have tools like meditation is a tool, just say on a basic level to quiet your mind, reduce stress, help alleviate some anxiety, sleep better, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just on the very, high
Yeah,
level of
we're
simplicity.
describing the symptoms of the behavior, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That just through that though, you'll begin to feel more centered. You can begin to feel more centered, right? Then therefore you can allow more time between the action and your reaction, like
Oh
something
yeah.
simple, right? So this to me is embodiment. When the organization within you,
So
your
then,
mind,
yes.
your energy, how you feel, how you think, changes how you react in the world. It's not just the physical movements, although there's that too. But
Yeah.
taking time between, hey, you suck, and your mouth yammering is an act of embodiment. It's
So
taking stock.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the answer is 100%.
Yeah.
Um, then 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 this is absolutely that.
Yeah.
Um, it, like I say, it doesn't have the strong physical connections, but it does have
Right.
the behavioral correlates, right? And if behavior has that component, it in a lot of ways it has the capacity to strengthen and lengthen the distance between emotional reactivity and cognitive process.
Hmm.
It also, by virtue of being able to take on and sit in multiple chairs in the room, your own sort of internal lodge, by being able to then use symbols from each of those chairs in a different way, you do gain a really meaningful agency is
Yeah.
a net product here. And when we talk about the ability to become a change agent in the world, one of the things that was attractive to me in Freemasonry sort of from the outside in, was this idea of a good man becoming a better one
Yeah.
and having a safe place to do that. I didn't know what that meant, but I've definitely wanted more of it, like Mikey likes it kind of thing. Go get some of that. When I got in and found out that, the answer was, okay, now here's here's the 1,000 books that you can read, and none of them have the answer. They all have a bite of the elephant, as it were. I said, I think we can go a little more direct to the chase,
Yeah.
which is where I took a lot of the principles of modern psychology and things like voices therapy and brought that back into what was already a rich and nuanced language, and just sort of put the two together in a way that allows for, again, that embodied practice like you talked about.
Right. I think the Freemasons started as full embodiment. You're cutting stone, you're slicing wood, you're hammering, you're
Yep.
chiseling. It started out that way. It's interesting that it started out very physical and turned to something psychoconceptual, philosophical, right? On the other
Yeah.
side.
And then stalled there, to be
Yeah.
frank,
Yeah.
right? It stopped. And the great age of fraternalism, where again, like a bunch of folks got into the craft and they weren't there for that speculative practice that
Right.
then re-embodied back into behavior. It
Right.
just kind of stalled as this pseudo Enlightenment society where a lot of folks
Right.
prided themselves on the membership but never turned that into behavior. Now, I'm not trying to disparage our deceased brethren, right? There are a lot of folks out there that did a lot of great things. But like any society, right? If you can help the members of a group become the best that they can be, that group is going to rise in provenance. It's going to rise in sort of social standing and all that kind of stuff, which is why I will tell you, and with cheerful confidence to this day, if you ever find yourself in trouble, find a Freemason.
Yeah.
I can tell you that guy is going to help you more than I can speak for the person on the street who hasn't gone through this training.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's the other part of this, right? Is you also get to buy into that cultural identity
Yeah.
that comes with folks that genuinely care. Now, we may all express it slightly differently, and not every Mason is unfortunately the sort of pinnacle of moral behavior. Some folks come in rougher stones than others,
Yes.
and that's a thing. And what I find as a man is I learn more from the folks that rub me the wrong way than the
Well, they're
folks I
mirrors and
tend to agree with.
reflections,
Yeah,
and
100%.
it's the stone to sharpen your blade against. I mean,
Exactly.
this is all
Exactly.
part of it. That stalling you talked about, I think about people in the Indian wisdom traditions. We have like Jiddu Krishnamurti was
Hmm.
very famous, and Ramana Maharshi, who was enlightened at the age of 16 suddenly, and all these thousands of people who went to listen to them talk and get a picture but never practiced anything. You
Yeah.
know, that's like why things stall. You can't we can't make the horse drink, at the well, I guess. But
Yeah, I mean, I'm sensitive to that as a concept. I think a lot of the difficulty with, and you've seen it over the course of history, but you also see it now,
yeah,
right? I buy the trappings of enlightenment
you're right.
over the direct pursuit of it, right? Because the direct pursuit is hard. The
Yes.
trappings, the trappings are easy,
Easy.
right? So I can go buy the mat and I can go buy the outfit.
Yeah,
And in some way you expect that transformation then to occur from the outside in without the
right.
effort, the corresponding effort. But this is all, to your point, this is all inner work. There is so much inner work here. And the more you can embrace the difficulty of it, the more you can essentially start to pursue what you come to find, and as I'm sure you have, is that the finger pointing at the moon is always the places you least want to go,
Right.
right? It's always the places you least want to go. And that's wouldn't it be great if you had a bunch of folks to do that with?
Yeah.
To
Terrific.
like go face the demons together?
Well,
Like,
that's what you were saying about the Sangha, which is the community in the Indian tradition, the term, the group that gets together to practice their craft of of their journey on the path, whatever that is. It's the chanting, it's the mantras, it's the studying, it's the understanding of the symbols, it's problem solving,
Yeah.
it's martial arts, it's all of those things. Yeah.
And
Love
so
it.
the one thing that comes out of Freemasonry that makes it sort of nuanced and different is it takes all faiths, right? So the only real requirement historically is that you are a man and that you believed in a supreme being of whatever flavor worked for you.
Mhm.
Um, we don't tend to ask what that is. If you if the answer to that question is yes for you, we don't really want to hear much more about it.
But you were
Right?
saying now that they've evolved a bit and women can come in, right? Just to,
So there
or does that
are
depend on the lodge?
so so there are no recognized co-Masonic lodges in the world.
Mm,
And what do I mean by that? So recognition is sort of granted by grand lodges of different jurisdictions. Men and women do not practice Freemasonry together.
mhm.
And for reasons that you might expect, rational ones, right?
Right.
So men's needs and women's needs are different, all that kind of stuff. The symbolic language of Freemasonry, I think, is accessible to all people. And one could argue that there might be benefit to having those conversations across gender lines. But there are no sort of recognized co-Masonic lodges. What there are women Freemasons groups,
Mm,
but like, never the twain shall meet kind of thing, right?
yeah.
And that's okay. Like
Yeah,
it's
totally.
it's not a problem to solve, right? There's opportunity for growth and synthesis and development moving forward, I'm certain.
Is the G in the symbol, the Masonic symbol for God, or does it represent the number seven because it's the seventh letter of the alphabet and that has some meaning, or is it both? Or neither?
So it used to be believed that it stood for geometry because
Uh,
geometry and masonry
um,
were symbolic.
right.
But we're taught in my jurisdiction that it's the symbol that indicates the God. Basically,
Got
it's
it. Yeah.
first letter of God,
Mhm.
um, of the word God rather, and so it's central to our practice and our faith in the work that we're doing. But Freemasonry is non-dogmatic, right? We don't necessarily have opinions on salvation or enlightenment or any of the kinds of things you would traditionally ascribe with religion. Our goal is to be a complementary practice, and as you can tell
Mm,
by the book, which we've
yeah.
talked about, it is very nondescript when it comes to how to exactly handle your relationship with the Godhead, right?
Right.
Like that's your business. What Freemasonry has to offer is a practical, sort of applicative guide for how you would navigate your own mind.
Yeah. Very good. So this next section of questions is about the operative principle. We're going to
Hmm.
switch gears a little. I think this is where your work is because it's very practical, the work that I read in your book.
Hmm.
So walk us through this, if you might, through the operative principle protocol. I'm sorry, the operative protocol. And why do you begin with the knock? And I look at the knocker behind you on your screen, if that's what you're talking about by the knock. Okay.
Yeah. So symbolically, right, in Freemasonry, were the three knocks that are mentioned in the Bible, right? Ask and it shall be given to you, or seek and you shall find, ask it shall be given to you, knock and it shall be made open unto you. That represents three different kinds of seeking, right? One is looking for information, one's looking for access, one's looking for insight, right? Um, when when we talk about the operative protocol, it is essentially a way to describe an interoceptive process.
Hmm.
And for the folks in the that are watching or listening or what have you that don't know what interoception is, because I didn't when I found it, and when I found it, felt like I had discovered the Holy Grail. This was the coolest concept ever. I learned it from a woman who is an occupational therapist.
Mhm.
I ran across her website. And essentially, interoception is the ability to understand your body's signals. This is really a difficult thing to do if you have a developmental disability of some sort, right? If you're autistic, where you don't understand kind of what your body's doing, you don't have a language for it, and there's not a strong sort of behavioral roadmap in school for how do you close that gap. Occupational therapists do a lot of study on how do we teach people to understand what it is they're feeling. So the knock represents a feeling, essentially. Your body is giving you a signal or an insight.
Mm.
And from that process, from that, maybe the tightening in the chest and the feeling of anxiety, or maybe the fight or flight response with the tingling in the hands that you want to kick somebody, punch somebody in the face, or the feet where you really want to run or flee. That is the knock. So what's the first sign of distress? Is really the beginning of the operative protocol. And that
Mm.
doesn't have to be physical. It can be, a felt experience of, malaise or what have you.
Mm. Why do we need structure instead of just simply trusting our intuition with all of this?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the answer is, how's it going for you?
Right.
I mean, if if we had all of the knowledge directly accessible, we would be able to do these things and the structure
Right.
wouldn't be necessary. The reality is we all have a different starting position. We all have a different educational background. None of us have the same anything. As much as we like to believe we're all on a level playing field. And so if we don't start with kind of the lowest common denominator and start from there, it's really hard to figure out where to go. And what you need once you have that sort of grounding is the very first step. And the very first step is almost always the same, right? So there's a symbolic process that I use, or it's a standard process. Really, actually, it's funny. It mirrors the process in Glendrewig and Ross that ARAA. It's in the book. It's awareness, reflection, analysis, action. Where you become aware of a situation or a problem, you reflect on that problem, you analyze what's the best response, and then you take the appropriate action.
Mm.
At every level or every step in the operative protocol, you go through that ARAA sequence where it's like, eh, what am I feeling? What am I aware of now that I wasn't before? In reflection, is there a common source for those things? Is there a common understanding behind the causation of these things? Then in analysis, how can I best respond in the moment to that situation? Again, to your point from earlier, creating that sort of cognitive space to separate from the moment and your response to the moment in a lot of ways, so you don't just fly off the handle all the time, and then taking the appropriate action.
Yeah,
But yeah,
deciding
I
on
think
that
you need
appropriate
structure.
action is where those tools come into place, right? I mean, to be able
Yeah,
to decide what is the appropriate action, you would have had to gone through a process of peeling back the onion layers, for lack of a better analogy.
exactly.
So reading your book, kind of like there's these things you go through, like space and then roll, and then you have a tool, what's the meaning and what's the structure, then there's like a milestone, and then I respond to the situation or something. It's like, is there like a map like that? Is there?
Let me see if I can help, right?
Yes.
Because I am well, I mean, we can get into the epistemological conversation. Do I possess my mind or not? But since I
Okay.
am the whatever, me and this thing are all lumped here together, may as well try and figure out how to use it, right? So from that knock, you then want to figure out, what am I trying to do? All right, I have this immediate visceral response. Do I need to work on myself here? Do I need to evaluate whether or not I should bring some new insight into the exchange?
Mhm.
Or do I need to, is this a worldly problem that I'm trying to solve? So you determine from that initial sort of awareness, what what domain of sort of problem solving should I entertain here? And then from there, you can put on the different roles in the lodge. We use the lodge roles, but you could use roles in your family. Do I put on the mother voice now? Is this a mothering kind of care, or is this a fatherly kind of care?
Mhm.
Or is this a sibling kind of situation? Or am I the child in this? What have you? You can use any one of myriad perspectives, essentially, to, once you've identified that you have this response, to essentially help you again take different seats in the room in isolation to help solve the problem. do I sit as yin? Do I sit as yang? Do I do I look for the non-dual take on this, or do I sit on that very fine edge of the coin that transcends and includes both?
Mhm.
When you walk through those perspectives, more often than not, you've solved the problem. You've gotten enough insight to essentially create enough cognitive distance so that you can either better triage that awareness as it arises again, so it doesn't derail you, or it no longer even has any effect, right? Like, that doesn't bother me anymore. The tools are then really used if you need deeper triage. And then the other layers after that are for even more sort of deeper and deeper triage and understanding for stuff that's maybe more internal in nature or more personal, right? A lot of this is always going to happen to you from the outside in. And so it's processing real world experiences through these filters.
Hmm. And I would think, like, I mean, you're talking a lot, you're referencing a lot about thinking about things from the different chairs or the different positions, right? And I think, like, yeah, a lot of people who are new at tasks, like me with Chinese medicine, when I learned acupuncture, so, okay, the pulse is this way, the tongue is that way. Could that be a liver thing? But wait, the thing is like, and you have all this, but later it becomes intuitive almost because you've got so much experience with it. Your mind automatically goes to pretty close to which tool you need to use, right?
I think of it in the same way you would probably think of the different styles of Shaolin martial art, right?
Yeah,
Every one of them represents a different embodied practice. Or take any one of the Greek gods that represents a different domain of psyche, right? A different approach to problem solving. You have, every sort of domain of the human condition exemplified as a type of godhead that you can sit as and be like, okay, so like, forget that. What would Jesus do, Bracelet? What would Thor do here? What would Odin do in
right.
this situation? What can I expect from Osiris over here? This is all the same kind of stuff,
Yeah,
except because the Masonic language is not encumbered
right.
by that weight of historical misinterpretation in a lot of ways. It's
Yes,
it's
yeah.
literally, I pick up a hammer. There's only so many things you can do with a hammer. When you have a hammer and a stone, you're going to knock the edges off. There's no additive process with a hammer,
Right, right, right.
right? There's no sort of other manipulative process that you're going to use. It is designed quite literally to do that. It's to take off the edges of stone, or it's to put hammer and nails, or what have you. Um, what's great about that is, again, it doesn't have the weight of the different lineages. Like, we're
Yeah,
not talking about this is a flavor of Tonglen meditation versus a
right.
different style of Zazen, right? We're talking about, get a saw. What can it teach you?
Right.
Oh, there's when you take a saw out of your tool bag, what do you do with it? Oh, I cut off the parts I don't want. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't get much better than
That's
that,
deep.
right? What are what are we going to do? Like, we don't have a lineage on saws where it's like some guys like, no, no, man, you got to play that thing like an instrument, and some other guys like, no, no, it's for beating people. It's a saw. Like, it is so self-evident that, like, this is the gift. I mean it, for as much as it's like hilarious. This is the gift of Freemasonry in a lot of ways.
Right,
It
right,
is the tool use here is unambiguous,
right.
right?
Yeah, because
The
I was
symbolic
thinking
application is straightforward.
while you were talking about Osiris and Thor and all these people, I was thinking, okay, so it's like, we're talking about archetypes, but when you start saying Thor versus, you know, whomever, you have ideas in your head of personality,
Yeah,
what country were
they're all
they in, of
loaded.
time, all this stuff. So it's it's really an archetype of symbolic use of tools. I mean, it's so simple, right?
Yeah.
The
Oh, and so
archetype
that's
of the saw, which kind? A router, a handsaw, a bow saw? Doesn't matter. It cuts through wood. It takes off
yeah,
extra stuff, right? Doesn't matter the art.
exactly. And
It's
what's
very
even
simple.
cooler about it, because it's so sort of neutral. Like,
Mm,
it's interpretation neutral or interpretation
right.
free in a lot of ways. The roles in the lodge are similar, right? So we have a lodge secretary, And every role, every officer in the lodge, when they take that job, does an oath to take that job. I will be the best secretary I can be. I will be
Yeah.
the best worshipful master I can be, whatever the case may be. The secretary's oath quite literally says, I will commit to writing anything fit to be remembered.
Hmm.
Now, what did, take that by itself. I can sit there and go through the various aspects of my life and say, what of the situation I'm responding to now viscerally, what's fit to be remembered?
Right.
What is fact? What is fiction? What is
Yeah.
feeling? What is known? Like these lenses are so sort of straight in their
Yeah.
application and operation that all of that interpretive stuff that comes with it is um, you're de-risking the entire process by not having that load, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Hmm. Do you think that transformation within individuals, behavioral transformation, psychological, can happen when someone's alone? I mean, or do they really need to have a tribe for a better, a group, a sangha? It's a question about mentorship, right? I mean, can we really mentorship be effective one to one within the Freemason framework, or does it really require that the lodge, the group, and the broader lodges?
There's a couple different questions that I want to unpack there. I think that and in order, right?
Yeah.
So first things first, no man is an island. I think that is a fact that if you have not come to that understanding on your own as a seeker, you're missing a fair amount of the path, right? The once you understand that no man is an island, then you begin down the process of understanding that the more vulnerable, open, and honest you can be with other people, the more vulnerable, open, and honest they are in return.
Hmm.
And that strengthens bonds and relationships and increases individual and organizational capacity, right? As the individuals in an organization increase their skills, knowledge, and abilities, the organization itself gets more agile and capable. This is leadership stuff, right? It sounds crazy. Like, why are we talking about this in the context of personal development? But um, if we're going to build a better world, if we're going to make this a better place, we need folks that are able to operate with each other at an increasing level of intimacy and capacity. Right
Hmm.
now, I'm not talking about physical intimacy per se. I'm talking about that kind of emotional, intellectual integrity. And as that goes up, essentially more capacity comes. Is it possible to go do this by yourself? To a point. I mean, Krishnamurti was in a cave for how long, right? Like, how, when you start doing this stuff by yourself, you might get to a certain level of understanding. But I take a lot of my cues from some developmental psychology stuff. And just because you're a Jedi in one line of development does not necessarily make you one in the other lines of development. So you sit here and you look at some of these, the gurus, for example, that understand the nature of reality in a fundamentally subtle and beautiful way, but they're, 350 pounds morbidly obese. Well, I think you're kind of missing some of the rest of the story, pal. Like there's a lot more to it here. So yeah, you can go and get really, really far on your own. But I think a group and a place where you can sort of have that mutual vulnerability and have that secular sort of pastoral infrastructure really does sort of skyrocket your development.
Yeah. I think groups are completely important, so vastly important to society and to individual mental health. I mean, we have a crisis now of loneliness because of the digital age. Everybody's interacting through email and Facebook and all of these things, but they're not really feeling connected. They're not meeting up with people, right? You said you meet every week. Ballet class, martial arts class, they meet every week, right? If you have a job outside your home, you're meeting with people on a daily basis, say. But there's so many people working from home since COVID, right? I mean, you're isolated and working from home. And now they're, psychologists are saying loneliness is one of a great health crisis at this time. So I think something like the Masons, being another form of sangha with a different
Yeah.
kind of commitment and learning is super important. Yeah.
And we're seeing that now. We're seeing an uptick in interest in things like Freemasonry and, your local Lions Club and Rotary groups and things like that. The One of the things that the digital age has provided is the opportunity to go find your hyper specialized group,
Yeah.
the folks that relate to you in a very, very specific context, which you can't get locally, right? There's only one guy who practices this kind of basket weaving in the tri-state area. I can't meet my people there. But what has happened is we have taken that ability to connect with special interests and tried to make it general interest.
Hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily build the strength of the relationships. I can tell you that there's folks that I have a digital relationship that is just as strong, if not
Yeah.
stronger, than some of the guys I might meet on a regular basis. But that's not a surrogate for meeting folks that I actually don't have a lot in common with, except for this one thing
Right.
that can actually act as the polishing stone or the coarse sandpaper on your psyche, where you go, God, I really hate the way that person does that.
Right.
But maybe he's got a point. You know what I mean? And then you can move from there and you go, oh, well, this is growth. And that's what growth is.
If someone has no interest whatsoever in becoming a Mason and they read your book, because you could have an interest in Freemasonry and secret societies and wisdom traditions, but you don't feel like joining anything. What universal principles in your book can be of great benefit to people?
So I tried to write the book from the perspective of
Yeah,
somebody who didn't have a Masonic background. And in fact, I,
indeed.
I wrote I wrote to that in one of the chapters. Like, look, there are folks that maybe they can't join a lodge for whatever reason. Maybe their family is really against it, or maybe their religion is really against it for whatever reason. Um, the process works the same whether you're a Mason or not. The book, you'll require a little bit more supporting material through other books out there that, like Freemasons for Dummies or whatever you, just to give you enough of the sort of linguistic context. But again, what I really love about Freemasonry is a hammer is a hammer. Like, a saw is a saw, a chisel is a chisel. Like, you don't need much training beyond that to start using it speculatively and then turn that back into the embodied practice that you talked about, right?
Right.
Um, I don't know that you have to be a joiner. I will tell you again, it's a force multiplier to go find a group. There is plenty of opportunities to do that. And if you're somebody who, again, who's in maybe a rural area, or somebody who's in a jurisdiction like a state or a country that doesn't have a strong Masonic presence, there's plenty of groups online that can help you have these kind of conversations.
Hmm.
And my group is one of them.
Yeah. And in inner life, we term this the practice field. When you're around other people in the similar environment, in the same room, studying or performing or practicing the same thing, it's a force multiplier, as you said,
Yeah.
which is different from just practicing in your home. That's why people go to monasteries to meditate and zazen, sit in zazen and meditate, rather than just doing it alone in their home, because there's something about that group dynamic and the energies of the group that just multiplies the experience. And then you have, with that group, it's almost like a morphic field of every practitioner who's ever been in Freemasonry or yoga or whatever behind you, moving into this practice field. It's really interesting.
We actually call that out quite literally
Oh, okay.
in the craft. So um, we we will refer to each other as traveling men. Are you a traveling man?
Right.
And that is, yes, I've traveled the same road that many good and worthy fellows have traveled before me. We
Okay.
literally are doing the same initiatic process that Ben Franklin went through.
Yeah.
You're connecting. It's like in
The
the cartoon The
transmission.
Avatar, right?
Hmm.
You get that whole, like, I'm connecting to all of prior lived experience that has gone through this process. And in that, you're connecting your past and your future all in the present moment through that initiatic process. Now, is it that transcendent? For a lot of folks, it's not, right? For a lot of folks, it's a bunch of old people in formal wear in a rundown building,
Right.
doing, reciting magic words or whatever. I'm not trying to be dismissive, right?
Right.
A lot of folks can't get there from here.
Yeah.
But everyone that I bring through the craft that I get the benefit of being the guide for, I get to say, like, look, you can look at this one way, or you can look at it this way. And when you understand or accept that this has the capacity to be transformative, the experience changes materially. And
Yeah.
you go, wow, that's really something. And I think that's really the value of practice of all sorts.
Yeah. And that, that for me lines up with the idea of a transmission, right? You can be a member of a group, but not be part of the transmission of the deep knowledge, like the real transmission, not just the talking, the listening. Okay, I get the gist. There's a millions of people studying martial arts today. Like 1 or 2% are really in a transmission of being deeply immersed in that practice, the understanding, the spiritual aspects, all the different aspects. Same with meditation. Mindfulness is huge. People are like, yeah, I do 5 minutes of mindfulness right before a meeting, man. It chills me out. It's like, yeah, that's not what it is, right? You're not really getting, yeah, you're not in that transmission. You don't have the real benefit. I did a podcast with Will Johnson, who's written a whole bunch of books on meditation. He's just awesome. Product of the 60s, typical, hey man, so cool. But he says, look, if you're not meditating 5 hours at a time, I don't want to talk about it. This 20-minute thing has nothing to do with this practice of transformation. I'm like, yeah, so there's deep levels of masonry and the practice and understanding and development and transmission. And there's the shallow end of the pool for people. And like you said, it all helps people in different ways at different levels, right?
Yeah, and it depends on where you are and what you're doing, right? I
Right.
mean, people asked Alan Watts, like, Alan, why don't you meditate anymore? And he's like, dude, when you get the message, you hang up the phone. Like, I
That's it.
got it, right? Like, I don't, and you can't argue that he didn't transmit,
Right.
right? For the right people at the right place in the right time, he was as good an answer as anybody. And I think that's what happens as you move up in altitude, developmental altitude. We'll just
Mm,
hypothetically call that what this is. As you move up in developmental attitude, everything is transmission, right? How I brush my teeth is a potential to teach somebody a breakthrough in their own life. How I go about preparing meals, it all becomes embodied living practice that has ripples in every environment out there, right?
yeah.
I think once you understand and accept that, uh, real sort of potentials emerge. But
Mm,
not everybody's operating at that level.
right. And they're there for different reasons, right? They join the lodge for different reasons. So
And some people
yeah,
join the martial arts for different
for different
reasons, right?
totally.
You get
Yeah.
the guys who are like, I want to be GI Joe badass, and you're like,
Hmm.
let's learn how to breathe for a bit. Well,
Yeah.
can, let's
Yeah.
figure out why it is you feel like that. You want to do that with your bare hands.
Yeah. Now, do we
I
need the
think
level to figure that out or the compass?
that's a good question.
Well, yeah, for
Uh,
like just as a practical application of a tool, if someone's coming in, like they just want to learn martial arts to kick ass because they have a revenge thing or something, or they've been bullied and somebody's picking on them, and you're asking that question as a Mason, if you were sitting there and overheard him and he leaves the school and you walk outside
I
and
would
say, hey
say
man,
I'd say check your compasses, bro. I
compasses.
would.
Okay,
Uh,
why? And what is the
so
compass?
so the compass is a tool used to create a circle,
Okay.
right? So you represent the center of that circle.
Mm,
When you overextend that circle, try and extend your boundaries control out into the world, or when you tighten that circle too much, so I only care about myself, you have a problem.
mm,
The reason that somebody might pursue physical dominance of other folks is essentially an overreach of control. And
mhm.
that's a compasses conversation.
Okay, very good. I was gonna, thank you. That was actually really good because my next I have just, I don't know, 6 closing questions, quick questions. And the first one is one symbol every person should understand from me from Freemasonry.
So it's interesting. The answer is, if you're not prepared for it, is shocking for some people because it seems morbid, but it's the level,
The
right?
left.
The level reminds us that we're traveling that level of time
Mm.
towards death. That in all cases, right, the outcome is identical.
Yes.
So, given that, how do you balance this moment against the last moment?
Mm.
It seems sad. Some folks don't like focusing on the end of life as an angle. But I will tell you right now, flipping off your Starbucks barista, when you break out the level, you probably don't. You probably go on the scale of a life. Did them getting my order wrong mean anything?
Right.
Like, probably not. So the level is the grand leveler, right? It's that understanding that um, that all things happen in proportion and space and time, and that the way you gauge and manage your responses should be on a lifetime, because we're all building towards that, the legacy of our own lives. Um, I think the level is probably one of the stronger, and the other one, I know you asked for one, but I'm going to give you the bonus, is the plumb, and that is to remain upright. So many
Mm.
people don't know what their own truth is, that they will blow, go whatever way the wind blows. Um, I did not understand my plumb. I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand how it worked when I became a Mason, and it took me a long time to figure out what my center was, what my truth was. Um, and that's a lifelong quest. It's perpetual refinement. But
Yeah.
once you sort of start down that path, um, you gain all sorts of abilities that are really hard to quantify, sort of without talking in normative terms. Like, um, you get the ability to say no. Once you understand who you are, you understand what's in your best interest to a degree and what isn't. You understand how you're going to express yourself. And that plumb is that the plumb is a tool that for plumb bob is a tool for folks that don't understand operative masonry. It's a tool that it's a weight on a string, and it's used to set columns in a building, right? So you want to set a column, it's got to be perpendicular to the center of the earth, parallel to the center of the earth. So when you hold that down, that weight will always point to ground. It'll always point to the center of gravity, right? If we were out in space, it would point to the strongest source of gravity. But on Earth, it is essentially that that downward force that keeps you centered. Um, that would be the other. If you have the level and the plumb,
Yeah, that's it.
the, the rest of it's a lot easier.
Well, that's, centered and upright on the plumb, and the level helps you keep stock of what's important and not as you keep going. I mean, I think thinking about death is, you don't have to think about death, but to know and to just admit out loud once, you know, we're all dying. Every day we're dying a little bit. Nobody is regenerating, in any real way. Um, so keeping that in mind while you're making decisions of how you want to live your life or treat people, or, you know, what's important is really, I think, one of the few important things in life, because it tells you how to treat your spouse, your kids, your family, your employer, yourself, right? Many people don't care for themselves, but they care for others. So,
And that's where you get into the other tools. Like, I can sit here and use, that Masonic lexicon and walk you through any of the numerous problems I've faced in my own life. And
yeah.
I can tell you exactly what tool matched was that I was miscalibrated against,
Mm.
right? I would weaponize the trowel. So you just spoke to that a second ago. That the trowel is the cement of brotherly love. It's care, right? It's the
Mm.
application of care. I would weaponize that care to try and get my needs met.
A
Well,
lot of
guess how
people
that
do.
worked out?
Yeah,
Exactly.
a
Right.
lot
It's
of
the
people do.
approval. You apply it to go seek out
Yeah,
approval. You go apply
right,
it to try and create imbalance scenarios where other people give you more than you've given.
right,
Any one of these tools has a misapplication and a proper use, right? Uh, Misapplication of the level we talked about is nihilism, right?
right.
It's abject nihilism. If I'm going to die, then nothing matters. That's a misapplication of the level,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's a refusal to find meaning in death and life, right? Same thing's true with all of these tools. They have a positive and sort of negative application. I can cut off too much material. I can misapply the plumb, or I can have it not attached to the right, you know, source of gravity or what have you.
Hmm. You can hurt yourself with the tools too by misapplication. I was sawing a tree branch the other day and it got stuck and I wiggled and it cut across my hand. You know, Uh,
I, I
it's
think,
like misapplication of a tool.
right. And
Right.
this is again one of the reasons why I love the symbols of the craft, is because they are so functionally practical,
Yeah.
right? Even the right tool used unskillfully
Right.
causes damage.
Yes. Yes. What are some of the most, what would you say is the most misunderstood aspect of Freemasonry? Publicly misunderstood, I would find that.
That is an important qualifier for more reasons than I can explain
Yeah.
in the balance of the show here. Um, I think it's I think the secrecy is misunderstood significantly, right?
Yeah.
Nobody has a problem with lawyers, and
Right.
attorney-client privilege. Nobody has a problem with a reporter keeping their sources secret. I think the secrecy conversation, even amongst ourselves, um, so you probably know this, but like Freemasons are the origin story of things like secret handshakes
Right.
and passwords and stuff like that. So there was a time when all that stuff was super relevant, when you wanted to essentially gain access to the network of Freemasons, whatever that was worth at the time. But now it's a whole lot easier to just scan your ID badge, right? It's a ton easier to just send some dude an email, and you'll know that there's not somebody in the middle that's not, of the craft.
Right.
So I think the misinterpretation of the secrets, and then the other part of that that's a natural corollary, as I'm sure you experience as well. There are fringes in any organization,
Of course.
and the vocal fringes kind of ruin it for everybody. So you'll get somebody who believes something that is, at best, an extremist interpretation of a symbolic application, and then they turn that up into, oh yes, and this is where the goats come from. Like, that's not ever been a thing, dude.
Right.
Like, not ever. Even in sort of regular Freemasonry of all sorts, none of the stuff that you're thinking or hearing out in the world is even close to accurate.
Yeah. Name one book that changed your life.
Uh, the book that put me on my path was On Walden Pond by Henry David Thoreau.
What
Uh,
was it about the message of that book that touched you?
um, it was the approach, actually. It was it was Henry David Thoreau empirically wanted to go figure it out. And when I first read that book as a teen, uh, I felt that existential, like, I need to get to the root of this.
Hmm.
And it led me down every single road since. I mean, every road was that quest. And now my quest is to help share the light on that road for others. Right.
Now, you and I have known each other for a while, and decade or so ago, I don't remember you being in that, or 15 years ago. It's got to be 15 or more years ago. I don't think you were a Mason yet. Or
No,
maybe you were and it was super secret. I didn't know the handshake.
no.
But so something took time between Walden as a teenager on Walden Pond, right? And finally going road, street, left turn, right turn, left turn. What led you to Freemasonry? When did that door open for you?
So
And
I wanted to become a Mason a long time ago when my father had gotten into it, and the way he told me about it was, look, this is a pre-screened group of trustworthy people. It's a great place to go make friends. I said, yeah, yeah, hell yeah, I'll have some. And then when he got in, like, he had an experience that wasn't as positive as maybe we would have all hoped. And so it just delayed
mm,
my joining. And I finally got fed up with waiting and found somebody I knew to be a Mason and asked them, hey, how do I go about this? And they got me in. I think the reason Freemasonry took for me in ways that none of the stuff that I had sought before that worked is quite frankly because of how not mired in the language of tradition it is. For such a deep, such a long running historical sort of practice, the tools are so unambiguous in their use. I think that's why I'm here and not in a sangha somewhere in a Zazen center or what have you. I think that's why this landed for me.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how the roads criss and cross until we get on it and it happens to be at the right time for us and our disposition, I guess is a word for it,
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So we began talking about transformation in the beginning, and I want to bring back to it someone else, and I'm sure you agree with this, someone else can't make you transform and they can't do the work for you, right? So within Masonry, what does that inner work require of the individual? Because you talked about a lot of inner work, and there's a lot of inner work in your book. It's join the group, become friends, be able to hear the criticism without taking it personally, all the symbolic language and the meanings and sitting and putting yourself in different chairs to apply different tools. That's a whole lot of stuff. And for me, it sounds super cool, but it could be overwhelming, but you've got to do it if you want to do it, right? So what does that
So
require of a Mason?
the inner work for everyone, Mason, non-Mason, uh, requires two things:
Mm,
courage
mm,
and honesty.
yeah.
If you have honesty and courage, and look, you have to understand that you're the easiest person to lie to. Like, yourself is the easiest person to well, I'll get back on that tomorrow, or oh yeah, maybe I'll just have this one donut, or whatever the case may be. uh, the dark places of your mind that you do not want to look, that are driving your behavior in ways that you can't know right now, requires courage and honesty. And if you have those things, if you carry both of those lights, you can face anything, even if you can't do it alone. As long as you can name it and be honest about what it is, you're on the path. You've seen this, I'm sure, right? This is, I don't think this is different in Freemasonry. I think these are the two things that everyone needs to undertake anything great. If you have courage and honesty, you'll get 1,000 times further than folks that can't be honest with themselves or are afraid to do so.
That's a very meaningful response. Thank you, Brian. And I think that's a terrific place to end our talk for today. So I'd like to thank you so much for spending time with me and for sending me this copy of your book. I really loved it, and for coming on and talking to our group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate being here.